toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. That was Jay Sekulow. Why don't you explain this in more detail, exactly what you're saying?
So, Sean, here's the thing I think that's important for people to understand. So this meeting takes place on January 5th, right? So they already had the first series of FISA warrants. Understand, though, that 2 of the 5 signatures on those FISA warrant applications are at this meeting. So that includes, of course, James Comey and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates. So they have this meeting on January 5th to brief the president on the Russia investigation. And the president, Susan Rice, in this email that she does 2.5 weeks after that event, says the president, wanted to make sure the law was being followed, but also was concerned about what we should or should not share with the incoming administration. But remember this, on January 5th, they have this meeting with President Obama, James Comey, Sally Yates, Vice President Biden, and Susan Rice. The very next day, James Comey flies up to New York, meets with Donald Trump, the president-elect, and reviews with him intelligence matters and briefs him on the Steele dossier. So what Grassley and Graham have asked for, which makes sense here, is why in the world would you literally, as the new president is being sworn in, and the inaugural festivities are well underway, parade's done, you're getting ready for the swearing in, why in the world would you do this memo in the last moment of the last day as your last act? And there's only one reason. You're covering for something that either somebody was at the meeting they were concerned would leak. I don't know, James Comey's leaked. Or somebody saw them at this meeting, or they were trying to cover their tracks. We don't know. I don't know. But it's just, if you look at the way the facts lay out, including the fact that this memo comes the day after the FISA warrant was renewed by the FISA court. So this just raises a whole, I think what Grassley and Graham have said is right. It's odd and pretty much, yeah, and like odd and unusual is the words they use.
To me, it's just it's a CYA, but it makes absolutely no sense. Is she doing this at the behest of Obama? Does this now bring Obama into it? In other words, what did he know about the FISA? What did he know about all of this with the dossier, et cetera?
Well, look what she says in the email. Now, part of it's redacted, of course, so we don't know all of it, but it says President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities, quote, by the book. The president stressed that he's not asking about, initiating, or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. And then the president said that he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. In other words, are we not going to tell the incoming administration information we have about Russia? That's what he's saying there. That's what she's saying that the president of the United States, then President Obama, said. That tells you a whole story. This is the incoming president of the United States. And they're going to withhold information from him. Yep, he's the president-elect.
Where do you think, how do we get to the bottom of what it actually means? Does this now open up an area of investigation into, other emails that were sent back and forth, text messages? Do we now have to wait another year to get information from Susan Rice and others that might have been involved? And did Comey lie when Comey said that, he'd only met with the president on X occasions, not mentioning this one?
I don't know what Comey did or did not do. This is what I do know, that Congress has asked Susan Rice a series of questions that they want an answer to. I think the date is February 22nd. They want a response in writing to these series of questions because, as Grassley and Graham said, this is unusual to say the least, odd. And we do know, and again, I think it's worth stressing, Sean, 2 of the 5 participants were people that signed off on the FISA warrants, which isn't unusual in and of itself, considering that they were the FBI director and then the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. But there they were. And they're in the Oval Office for this meeting. And why is it that Susan Rice waited over 2 weeks to put this in writing, to memorialize this? So you're right. It is a sense it's to cover their tracks. I don't know exactly what the tracks they're trying to cover are. And I think that's where Congress, through its oversight, needs to move swiftly. And it looks like they are.
I want to talk a little bit about the 2 memos that came out, the Nunes memo, then the Grassley-Graham memo, and the Grassley-Graham memo that was the unredacted version, which I think was very, very revealing. Because at the end of the day, I'm I won't bore the audience with giving the full history here, but James Comey and Peter Strzok writing the exoneration of Hillary on the email server scandal months before they interview her and 17 other key people. That to me is pretty unbelievable. I've never heard of an investigation working that way. This is after, of course, she pretty much stole, or the primary against Bernie was rigged. All right. So she's funneling money through her campaign through a law firm as the DNC that Donna Brazile says she was controlling the money of, meaning Hillary, through the same law firm. They pay for a Russian dossier full of salacious information. And we're even told in the Grassley-Graham memo that it's Russian government information, but put that aside. All right, so it's bad enough she's going to pay for information. Nobody verified it. Fusion GPS didn't verify it. The Clinton campaign didn't verify it. Nobody apparently verified it. But then it gets worse. Then the Grassley-Graham memo goes on to say that the bulk of evidence presented to acquire or the FISA warrant against Carter Page was the dossier. Nobody had verified the dossier. Then we find out the unverified dossier. By the way, even James Comey said to Donald Trump, this is in October, they're issuing the warrant, but he said in January it was still unverified and salacious.
Right.
Right. So that's 3 months earlier now. He's apparently part of a group presenting it to a FISA court to get a warrant. And the only thing we get is a footnote that says may be political in nature when everybody knew Clinton bought and paid for it.
Yeah, well, I thought what Michael Isikoff said was also interesting, that they based his statement, the press account was also in the application, evidently, and he said, I just based that off the Steele dossier. So it was evidence verifying its own evidence. I mean, it was the same. They were using the same information to verify the same information, so it was circular in nature. I mean, I think if I was the FISA judge, I wouldn't be too happy about any of this. And when you look at what has taken place here, I think that, and I think this is where the questions lie, is I don't think there's any question that absent the Steele dossier, there would have been no FISA warrant even sought. I mean, that's according to, on the Nunes memo, that's according to what is going to be, was in the transcripts from the testimony from Rod Rosenstein. Now, here's what's interesting. You have the Adam Schiff memo, the Democratic response memo, which has gone back to the House Democrats to work with the FBI to get it redacted the way so it won't give up sources and methods. And Schiff was very quick to say they'll do that. I think they were trying to kind of one step away or two-step the president. I think he outstepped them by just sending it back. They were hoping he would send it back, either not send it back or send it back redacted. And I think what he did instead, which I think was the smarter and more appropriate approach, is here it is back to you. You get this cleared with the FBI and work it out. And you saw a very mild Adam Schiff in response to that. A very mild Adam Schiff in response to that. But look, I don't think there's going to be anything. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But I will tell you this. I am working right now on putting together a complete timeline of everything, Sean, that took place. And it's not over that long of a period of time. It's probably going to be 4 months. And I think when you see it in a timeline, it's going to be breathtaking.
Explain the timeline. So our audience is following this closely.
Yeah, so you've got, in the summer of 2016, we know they're attempting to get FISA warrants and they're not successful, right? I mean, they make at least 2 attempts. They don't get FISA warrants. And that's very rarely where they don't get them, but they didn't get them here. They come back in with the dossier. They get the FISA warrant on the dossier. Then they have the interviews. You had the interviews with General Flynn, with the FBI. That's all taking place in this period of time. Now we have the meeting, right? We have a meeting on January 5th that we now know about with 2 of the 5 signatures on the FISA warrant. They're briefing the President of the United States, President Obama. The next day, what happens? The president-elect gets briefed by, in this particular case, James Comey, the FBI director, and the dossier is brought up, and he said it's unverified and salacious, and you're not under investigation. Then the FBI comes back in and interviews General Flynn again. And there's evidence now that the FBI did not think he was not telling the truth. They just think he was confused. That's according to James Comey's own testimony. So this is all happening within months. I mean, you got all of this happening in months. Then don't forget the executive order that was changed the year before, right at the end of the term. So you got all of these end-of-the-term stuff happening, and there's really no great explanation for any of it.
Then how do we get to the point where a special counsel is appointed in this whole thing, and where are we in that whole mess?
Well, here's how it works. So the Attorney General is supposed to make an evaluation of whether this investigation can be done internally or needs a special counsel. I said when you add, now if you want to continue the timeline out, and during that same summer of 2016, you also had the Fusion GPS matter with the Steele dossier. You had the number 4 at the Justice Department, Bruce Orr's wife, working for Fusion GPS, assigned specifically to the Russian dossier to work with Steele. He's meeting with them, by the way. Orr's meeting with Steele. Steele becomes the basis of his dossier becomes the basis of the warrant. Then he leaks it to the press. The FBI says they pull back their formal relationship with him, although Bruce Orr is still meeting and talking with him, whose wife is working for Fusion GPS. So this is a shell game they played here. They just kind of moving the. It's almost like, remember the game Whack-A-Mole? You hit the mold.
Yeah,
and
you hit one and then up pops another one.
This is what it is. You kind of hit one here and boom, another one comes up. So I think what you have to do, what I'm going to do, is put together a full timeline on this to get an understanding.
Do you see, well, I'll ask you on the other side of this. 800-941-SEAN is our toll-free telephone number. More with Jay Sekulow, counsel for the president, chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. All right, as we continue, Jay Sekulow, he is the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, also counsel to the president. All right, so you're going to make this timeline out. I wouldn't mind putting it on TV, number one. Number two, I think it is an important timeline. But number three, how dangerous is it? You know, two things have happened here. We spent over a year with no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And every media outlet breathlessly, hysterically reporting this again and again and again and again, okay? Then we've got instances where Hillary did pay for Russian lies about an opposition candidate. And then it gets worse because that was used as the bulk of information to acquire a FISA warrant against a opposition party candidate, against one of his members. And then that was used to also spy on an incoming administration. Now, to me, when you put all this together and then you add in there the, Strzok and Page texts and the fact that Andrew McCabe is involved and then the exoneration before investigation, it seems like everything was fixed just for this. How do you ever straighten out that if we can't have elections in this country where bought and paid for Russian lies don't raise enough eyebrows for people, we're in trouble?
Well, look, I mean, you hit the kind of the nail on the head there, and the fact of the matter is nobody knows, none of us know the full nature and scope of what's going on here. I mean, there are individuals that, and they may, by the way, some of these government officials may not know the ins and outs of everything that's involved here. But I think what has to happen now is you look at this and try to piece together what is taking place, what is transpiring. You ask yourself, what was the initial impetus, the cause for all of this, and then how did it play out over time? We're leaving out the leaking by James Comey of the conversation he had with the President of the United States. That's why I'm saying all of this has to now be, I'm going to be meeting about this as soon as we're done, laid out in a comprehensive timeline. I mean, just a comprehensive timeline to get a real understanding of exactly what was at play during these critical periods. None of us know for sure. We have hunches, ideas, but none of us know for sure. And look, the fact is we may never know, but it's got enough concern that you got Senator Grassley and Senator Graham, neither one of which are conspiratorial, that are concerned about this.
Well, I think the fact that these committees now are releasing this information, do we know for sure sources and methods were in the Democratic memo that the FBI sent back? It had to be, right?
Yeah, well, that's the assumption, that there was concern over sources and methods, and that's the basis upon which that the White House counsel in reviewing the documents would that be one reason to send it back? I haven't seen it, so I don't know, but that's, I'm hearing the same things you're hearing, and that was a concern. And Adam Schiff did not seem to deny that when asked on, I think it was ABC This Week or one of the programs, maybe Space the Nation. He said, no, we'll work with them to get it resolved. So he did not push back on that at all. In fact, you don't hear much about that right now at all.
No.
I think they realize they've got to do it.
All right, Jay Sekulow, we appreciate your time as always.